And he'll say, yeah.
If we have any non-voters, please sit in this section to my left. All voters to the other side and to the middle or back. Voters are over there.
Somebody's looking for him. I think he snuck by without checking in.
Who's that?
Don Hall. I think he got in without signing in. Don's usually right up in there.
We don't need a quorum count.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1, 2.
I don't see him. He's
And we're here?
No, don't see him.
How are you doing, Zach? Good. You don't have to be Usain Bolt to catch Don, so what's the deal here?
Hi, Alan. Hi, dear.
Right, Claire?
What's that?
I said, you don't have to be Usain Bolt to catch Don Hall.
Oh,
What's the deal here?
they just got it right.
Okay.
Have you one of these? No, I haven't. I don't see Don.
Oh, can we get kind of water?
Yeah, he's got water. I'll go look for Richard.
Okay.
I'll go find him. Claire, for you, I'll find him. I guarantee. Oh my goodness. I'm just that good.
See, I knew you could do it.
Thanks, Claire.
There was an accident in Kingston.
Oh, no.
This is a,
Yeah, this is a cone.
Oh.
So we have to be very careful because it will pick you and me up.
Oh. Well, finally, the
Yeah.
folks will get to see the...
Okay, ladies, please come in. Ladies and gentlemen, please come in and take your seat. We're approaching 7 o'clock and we can get started right away.
I had to... Oh, well.
Do you need it?
There's only one plug.
Rich, look on the. Oh, jeez, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's mine.
You ready, Marianne? I am. Okay. It is now 7 o'clock. I will ask everyone to please take your seats. If we have non-voters in the room, please sit in this section to my left. All the voters to the right and in the back. We don't need to take a quorum count because we have no quorum that is required. So I am going to call this meeting to order. I'm going to ask the town clerk to read the posting of the warrant.
Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Plymouth SS, to either of the constables of the town of Wareham, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are hereby directed to notify and warn the legal voters of the town qualified to vote in town affairs to meet in the Wareham High School Auditorium, Viking Drive, Wareham, Mass, on Monday, March 12th, 2018, at 7 o'clock p.m. to act on the following articles.
I will waive the reading of the warrant.
Given under our hands this 13th day of February in the year 2018, Wareham Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ladies and gentlemen, if you please would stand for the posting of the colors and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated, and I would like to thank the Wareham High School Junior ROTC. I would like to introduce you to those who are on the stage. To my right, we have Attorney Richard Bowen, our Town Council, Mr. Derek Sullivan, our Town Administrator, Peter Teitelbaum, Clerk of the Board of Selectmen, Chairman, I'm sorry. Alan Slavin. I was looking at Alan. Alan Slavin, who's the clerk. Patrick Tropiano and Tony Scasiotti. And then further down on the right is the Finance Committee, Mr. Bernie Pigeon, Mr. David Hurd, Mr. Stefanski, Pat Rumney, and Ellis Bailey. Now, is there anyone who has never been to town meeting before? Okay, so we have a few rules. I'll go over them quickly because I know we want to get to the business and we want to get home before it starts to snow. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 15, whenever there is a 2/3 vote required by statute, a vote may be declared by the moderator without account, recorded as such by the clerk upon such declaration, provided, however, that if 7 or more voting members of town meeting doubt the vote, a counted vote shall be taken. This is in accordance with Article 12 of the October 27, 2003 town meeting. It was approved by the Attorney General November 21st of 2003. The warrant, which was duly posted in every precinct and posted on the town website, is our agenda for the evening. Town meeting does not come to an end until we finish all of the articles and they have been voted upon. I will ask for a motion for each article, and you should listen carefully to the motion that's before you. We put the motions up on the screen so that you can see them and you can read them. Sometimes they are not exactly as what's in your warrant, but what we vote on is what is up on the screen. Following the motion, I will ask the proponent to speak to the motion, and then I will ask the Board of Selectmen for their vote and the Finance Committee for their vote and recommendation, and then we will open it up to debate. If you wish to speak on an article, there are 2 microphones. I would ask that there are only 2 people at the microphone at a time, and that is for safety's sake. Your remarks should be limited to what is before us, what the subject matter is of the article. I ask that you be civil and respectful, and that you direct all of your comments through the moderator. It has been tradition of town meeting, going back many, many years, and I've been attending town meeting for over 50, that the proponent of an article will have 5 minutes to speak, and all others will have 2 minutes. I will now ask if you wish to continue that tradition, and if so, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Now, just because we hit 2 minutes, I'm not going to stop someone in the middle of a word, but 2 minutes is your limit, or 5 minutes. If we need to take a count, I will ask the tellers to come forward. You all have been given a card. I would ask that you hold it up, you keep it up until they tell you that they have finished with your row, and then you may put it down. Make sure that you have a whole card. Do not tear it in half. Do not share it with anyone. When they get done, we will take a tally of the votes. Now, amendments can be offered to articles after they've been debated or during the debate, but you must present them in writing so that the clerk has a record of them. For reconsideration, it requires a simple majority. However, we will only accept reconsideration if it has been moved on the same night of town meeting that the article has been brought up. It has to be made by a member on the prevailing side, and it must be seconded, and it is debatable. And I will only permit it if there has been a hasty or ill-advised or an erroneous action that has been taken, or if there was some information given that wasn't previously known. Now, non-voters should be in this section. As far as photo policy, a photo policy, I ask you to not take photos unless you have asked for permission ahead of time. This is a legislative body. It is not an open meeting. The press has already indicated that they will take a photo. They will take a photo only from the press section, and they are not to take photos during a vote. If for some reason you need to go out, please use this door to my left and come back in. That's so that we can maintain the integrity of people coming and going. There is no smoking on school grounds, so that means that you can't go out and have a cigarette. And if you want to, you have to actually leave the school property. And if you're parked in the fire lane, I would strongly suggest that you might want to go out and move your vehicle. So please silence your cell phones, and we will move on with tonight's meeting. Does the chairman of the board wish to address the body?
Thank you, Madam Moderator, I do. Before you tonight, you have two warrant articles. The first one is a proposal to amend the regular bylaws of the town to allow the town to collect a 3% tax upon the retail sale of marijuana within the town of Wareham. The second article is a zoning bylaw change that would regulate the number of retail marijuana establishments within the town of Wareham and limit it to 3. The other portion of the article would restrict the time, place, and manner where these things could happen in terms of the zoning districts. I cannot emphasize enough that a no vote on these articles and failure to pass will mean that the town has zero control over the number of retail marijuana establishments that come here and where they can be located. This article was put together substantially by our town planner. Both Attorney Bowen and I reviewed it carefully. During the process of considering these issues, we had frequent reports from Selectman Slavin, who is a vice president of the Selectmen's branch of the Massachusetts Municipal Association. He was up on Beacon Hill. He attended hearing after hearing relating to marijuana. He was provided with a lot of information, and he kept us up to date on this to the extent that we could. Understand that this whole process at the state level has been, to coin a phrase, a bit of a hash. The law was passed by voter referendum in 2016. Since then, it's been changed through the legislature. We've had conflicting information coming down on what we could and could not do, both from the Attorney General and also from the Cannabis Control Commission. Effective April 1st, anybody can apply in the town of Wareham or anywhere else in the state where the population of that town or city voted to legalize marijuana can apply for a retail license. That's why we're having this meeting now, so that we can hopefully adopt these regulations and have them in place. If we fail to pass these articles tonight, as of April 1st, anybody can go in and apply for a retail marijuana license. And they can apply to conduct this trade anywhere in town. So I just want to make it clear that we're here tonight, not in support of marijuana, not in opposition of marijuana, but to create a reasonable framework of regulations so that going forward, we, as the legislative body of the town of Wareham, have exercised some control over where this can take place and how much of it takes place. And with that, I guess I don't have anything more to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Does the chairman of the Finance Committee wish to address the audience?
The issues we have before us this evening are, for some, very emotional, but we have to act in the best interest of our community, and as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen has pointed out, the town has approved the retail sale of marijuana within our community. What we must do is try and control it to the extent that it reflects our values within our community. And I encourage you to read these and approve it as the Finance Committee has recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, usually we do, as per our bylaw, our articles by lottery. We have 2 articles tonight, and because the second one must be taken after the first one, we're going to take them in order. So before us, we have Article 1, to present the motion? Bernie, we have a motion for Article 1?
Yes, Madam Moderator, thank you. Move to approve Article 1 to see if the town meeting will vote to accept state law, Mass General Laws 64N, Section 3A, as amended by Chapter 55, Section 13 of the Acts of 2017, authorizing imposition of a tax of 3% on sales by marijuana retailers or take any other action thereto.
Have a motion, but Bernie, actually, if you would rescind and then rescind the section, the motion is to have town meeting vote to accept the provisions of state law as printed in the warrant.
Yes, ma'am.
Second.
Okay, so we have the motion before us as on the screen before you, and a second. And the motion before you is I move that the town meeting vote to accept the provisions of state law as printed in the warrant. So you have the motion before you. If you have the warrant before you, is there anything to be said on the article? Oh, okay, may I have the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen? Just a second. May I have the,
We still have to do this first. The Board of Selectmen voted 4-0-0 in favor of this article.
may I have the recommendation of the and vote of the Finance Committee?
Finance Committee recommends approval of this article by a vote in 7-0-0.
To speak to the article?
Yes, thank you, Madam Moderator. I'd also note that the Planning Board recommended approval of the Article 400. This article is inserted at the request of the Board of Selectmen. Essentially, what we're asking you to do is to adopt this portion of state law that allows us to impose a tax of 3% on all retail sales of marijuana within the town of Wareham. One of the things that should be pointed out is that coming up in the fall, at some point, retail sales will allowed to be in the form of delivery. So if we have retail marijuana operations in the town, in addition to collecting on the walk-up sales, if you will, to the store, a tax of 3%, we'll also be able to collect 3% on deliveries that occur out of town. Interestingly enough, I understand that every community on Cape Cod, except for Provincetown, voted not to legalize marijuana, and accordingly, in order for them to get stores, they have to go back to a vote of their general population at an election to overturn that in order to have stores. So we will be the last place before Provincetown where marijuana can be sold if we pass these articles tonight. Again, this isn't necessarily an endorsement of marijuana. It is, however, an endorsement of the fact that if it's coming here and we have it and marijuana is being sold here, that this is the town's opportunity to profit a little bit from that trade. We are limited by state law to 3%. I wish they would have let us charge a little more because your article would have looked a little differently had they done that, but that's not the case. The state is collecting approximately 20-something% on it, but this is what they allow municipalities to collect. So I would urge passage of the article. Simply put, it's kind of silly to have marijuana retail here and not be able to charge for it. Thank you very much.
Is there anything further to be said on Article 1? Gentleman on my right.
Yes, Don Jepson, 15 Long Beach Road.
Can you speak up right into the microphone, please?
Yes, Don Jepson, 15 Long Beach Road. And my question is, how is this money going to be spent? And the reason that I'm asking that, it's because I think it's, if the town is going to profit on the sale of this, that the money should be spent in a fashion so that the selectmen are not in the drug business. In other words, what I'm saying is that it should be, the money should be directed towards nonprofits. Wareham Fighting Against Addiction is one. Brent Hastings Memorial Fund, he's a Wareham person who overdosed at heroin. Chris Herons, there's a whole list, the homeless people, drug awareness and DARE programs, and Brain Injury Association. There's a lot of deserving groups that if their money is going to be collected, I think it should go to them and not to the general fund. Thank you.
Thank you. To answer the question?
Thank you. The funds are not earmarked, so they'd go to the general fund. And would only be appropriated by town meeting.
Thank you. Is there anything further to be said on Article 1? Seeing no one standing, I will call for a vote. The motion before you is to accept the provisions of state law as printed in your warrant. It requires a majority vote. I will try for unanimous. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Article 2.
Article 2, Madam Moderator, to see if the town meeting will vote to amend the Wareham zoning bylaws for regulation of marijuana establishments and related facilities. Yes.
The motion is up on the screen for you.
I don't have that motion in front of me, Madam.
It's
So
as
perhaps someone
as
may-
printed in the warrant.
As printed in the warrant.
Second.
Thank you. To
Thank you,
speak to the
Peter.
article? First of all, Mr. Barrett, this zoning bylaw requires a public hearing by the planning board. Do you have a report?
George Barrett, Chairman of the Planning Board. Pursuant to Section 5 of the State Zoning Act, the Wareham Planning Board held a public hearing on February 12, 2018 on the proposed amendments to the Wareham zoning bylaws, included in the warrant as Article 2. Board voted to recommend favorable action on the article as printed in the warrant 400. We did hold a public hearing on February 12th. There was a lot of input on the whys and the wherefores of whether this should be legal in the first place. But those that seemed to be knowledgeable in the industry were quite pleased with our zoning changes. Say, other than opposition to the whole process, I don't think anybody had a problem with the bylaws themselves, other than a few location-wise. As Chairman Titlebaum pointed out, a yes vote would allow these uses with some restrictions, require a special permit in industrial, institutional, and strip commercial east of a line drawn from Glen Charlie Road to Great Neck Road, basically. It would limit the number to 3, and a no vote would allow our moratorium to expire and would allow these as fast as they could go in. So, do hope you support this article.
Thank you. Mr. Buckland, do you care to speak to the article?
Yes, thank you. Ken Buckland, Director of Planning and Community Development. The article was set up into 3 parts. First, we define what marijuana establishments are in accordance with the state law. Next, we have permit standards, which include the limitation on the number of marijuana facilities, retailers that are allowed. We have a minimum separation of 1,500 feet between marijuana retailers. We have that the marijuana establishments are going to be have to be in conformance with state regulations and licensing requirements, and there are a number of them and quite detailed restrictions under the state regulations that are coming out this week, and that all of the establishments are going to have to be in conformance with the underlying zoning, which is so it fits with the density dimensions and height restrictions of existing zoning. This would include regulations on signage that are in conformance with the zoning bylaws. Also, that use variances are not allowed by a marijuana establishment or a medical marijuana treatment center. And then we have a section that relates to the table of uses within the zoning that specifies where special permits are required by the Zoning Board of Appeals for the installation of one of the establishments.
Thank you. May I have the vote of the Board of Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen voted a favorable action 400.
Thank you. May I have the vote and the recommendation of the Finance Committee?
The Finance Committee recommends favorable action 700.
Thank you. Is there anything further to be said? Gentleman on my left?
I stand to amend the motion.
Please state your name.
My name is Jim Manise, Precinct 4. I stand to amend the article as written by removing the institutional district for retail establishments. And I don't believe it belongs there. You know, there's churches, schools, institutional, residential, and it doesn't affect the ability of that individual to get a license in another area if they already have the first dibs on getting a license. It just restricts the commercial retail in the institutional area. And I have it written here if you'd like a copy of that. We can get a second.
Do you have that in writing, Mr. Moniz?
Yes, I do. You're welcome.
So he's making it. This is within the scope of the article as an amendment. Do I hear a second? We have a second. What now comes before you is the article as amended by Mr. Moniz. Would you like the floor to explain why, or?
Would you like me to speak on it some more?
Yes, please.
Well, you know, as everybody's saying, you know, if the law's passed, we need to move on the law in order to get some guidelines in place before the deadline of April 1st. So I'm not against it. I just don't think a commercial retail establishment belongs in the institutional district within the town. Let's remove it. Let's not have it going forward for special zoning and having a lot of contention. Let's just put it in the commercial strip area. I brought this up at the meeting that they had for the planning board, and I'm bringing it up again now. Maybe we can get some support for that. Again, I'm not against the idea of the whole thing. It's just I don't believe it belongs in the institutional area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Titlebaum?
Yes. Previously, back in 2014 or 2015, when medical marijuana establishments were legalized, we did receive an application from an outfit called Compassionate Care. They're actually operating under their third name now because they've actually been bought out a couple of times. But this outfit presently has a medicinal marijuana host agreement from the town of Wareham to sell marijuana there for medicinal purposes. As the law is written, as of right, they can actually get a retail marijuana license. So I don't see that changing this is going to have any impact on their ability to go forward with a license for the institutional area. And I do believe that in conversations that they had several months ago with the town administrator and myself, that they were interested in seeking a retail marijuana license as well. So while I understand the intent of your amendment, I don't think it's going to achieve the result that you desire.
Can I, well, I understand what you're saying. Again, it does not keep them from applying for a retail license. They just have to put it somewhere else. They can't have a retail business in the institutional area. That's all it's stating. And I don't believe the law says that you cannot require them not to do that.
Thank you. Gentleman on my right?
Yes. How are you? So,
please state your name.
My name is Andrew Holmes on Main Street in West Wareham. And yes, about this article, now I'm a retailer in the community. I am sort of a traveling merchant now, but I am interested in opening up a retail location this season. And so basically, I'm sort of requesting that I be able to apply for a retail license. But I sort of do agree that we should kind of cut it off after a certain point, just for the sake of everybody. Now, I'm not a big medical dispensary or grow operation. I'm not a big facility or anything like that. I'm just a small retailer, just a small sole
Okay.
proprietor.
Mr.
but-
Holmes, right
yeah.
now, we have an amendment on the floor.
Right.
And the amendment is to strike it from the institutional zone. So that's what we need to address.
Okay.
Your questions probably could come up when we go back to the original.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Sorry, my mistake.
No problem. No problem. Mr. Tropiano?
Hi. Okay, so the medical marijuana place that's in the institutional zone is right at the base of the hospital. And matter of fact, that's where they wanted to be when they decided, and they literally have bought a building. So they not only, they're going to open next month, by the way, their growing facility, which happens to be in, I think, Holliston, Mass., is ready to produce now, so they're going to start doing their medical marijuana thing in April, which they can because they've had the license for a while. And they own the building, they're preparing the building, they have an agreement with the town, and by doing or closing them out of the district that they're in doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all, in fact. And, you know, the institutional zone is where the hospital is, everybody knows. And I don't see why there's an issue of it being at the base of the hospital. As a matter of fact, honest with you, that was one of the reasons why they went there, is because it was at the base of the hospital. Because they do a lot of work in supporting rehabbing and all that kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, they're a nonprofit just for that reason. And they give a lot of money away to try to help with addiction, and whether it's marijuana or whatever the addiction is. And so I think we should strike down this article, this amendment.
Thank you.
Well, I still have a couple minutes, I believe.
Mr. Mendes, you have a minute left.
Okay. I have no argument, you know, they have the right to have a medical marijuana treatment center there and to sell marijuana for medical purposes. There's a totally different foot traffic that are going to come in for medical marijuana, you know, probably with an insurance card or something else, than the foot traffic that's going to go into a retail place. And I don't believe it belongs in that district. Thank you.
Thank you. On my left?
Hello, Donna Fox Rubin, Highland Shores Drive. I actually have more of a question to help me make a decision on how I want to vote. Can someone, actually maybe two questions. Can someone clarify for me the difference between a medical marijuana treatment center, also known as a registered marijuana dispensary, and a marijuana retailer? The reason I ask is, if I understand this amendment, only the number of retailers is limited to 3, and it doesn't appear that that limitation applies to the dispensaries.
To answer the question?
Okay, so, oh no, I'm sorry. Can you answer the question?
To answer
Okay.
the question.
All right, so the medical marijuana facility is different than a retail facility, but according to the statute of the law, they automatically get to apply for a retail license, and they typically do. In other words, one of the retail licenses is automatically theirs. I mean, all they got to do is say, we want it, and they get it. So they will be a retailer as well. It's just the way that the system is designed. The reason for that is that it kind of would close them out. As a medical marijuana facility, you know, you're going to come with a prescription and get marijuana, but you know, if they're selling it down the street, why bother, so to speak? So that's why they wrote it in that they had first choice. So they're going to say yes, and they have made an inroad that they want the license. So that'll be one of the licenses, so there'll be 2 left. That's really the difference between the 2 of them. And I hope that clears up your question.
So that would be one of the 3.
Could you come back to the microphone and just your second question, please, so everyone can hear it?
Sorry. So it's unlikely that a dispensary would exist without seeking the marijuana retailer's license. So I just seek to confirm that they would be one of the 3 if we pass this bylaw.
To answer the question.
Yes. This is complicated because
Didn't hit the button properly. This is a very complicated situation because the state Cannabis Control Commission has been going back and forth. Your medical marijuana facility is licensed not by the town, it's licensed by the Department of Public Health. They actually do the license. The town has no input at all except to get an agreement after the fact. The retail marijuana basically have to go again to the Cannabis Control Commission, which is a different group, and they basically apply for a license for retail, which is different than medical, because medical has to do with lotions and different things for medical use itself, whereas a retail is selling marijuana-infused products, et cetera, plus the actual marijuana itself. So there's two different things as far as it goes. The pricing, et cetera, will be different. The restrictions on the medical are much more severe than on the retail as far as how they do business, costs more, et cetera. The state has said that they will give some preference if someone has a medical marijuana facility. It's not a guarantee, and they don't automatically get it if they want it. So it's not something there. It has to be, it goes through a whole procedure. The town of Wareham has to do what they call a host agreement with the retail store. They have to basically comply with all our bylaws, et cetera, and then they go back to the Cannabis Control Commission, and the Cannabis Control Commission takes all the different applications, and they make the decision who gets a license and who doesn't. We have technically 2.6 licenses under the state minimum that they allow through the Cannabis Control Commission. And that 2.6, we decided to round off to the high end because we couldn't get an answer, but we didn't want to be in a position where someone would come back and sue us saying, you only gave us 2 instead of 3. Well, they haven't really clarified it yet, unfortunately.
What?
So the bottom line is that they are different. They're licensed through different agencies. Eventually, by the end of this year, everything will go to the Cannabis Control Commission. Right now, it's split. Does that answer your question, or you need anything more than that?
Okay, she's
Thank you.
shaking her head, yes. On my right, behind Mr. Holmes.
Hi, my name is April Yelnation. I live in Swift Beach. I just have a question, definitely regarding all of this. There are 3 retail licenses, which in theory, one would go to the dispensary, but is that dispensary going to have that retail license at that same location, or are they going to have a separate location? And because the dispensary is different from the retail location and the pricings are different, how is that 3% now factored into all of this? Or is it not?
Okay, let me just bring us back to what we have on the floor is an amendment to strike out an institutional area. So the question should refer to that, and the questions that you have when we go back to the original article would be more appropriate at that time.
Madam Moderator, if I may, I think she's actually trying to ask how this would work within one building.
Correct,
Okay.
because you do have the dispensary, and then you've got a
Exactly.
retail location, and that it's all of one same location, but I don't believe it should be.
Well, interestingly enough, the state agrees with, through you, Madam Moderator.
To answer the question.
Interestingly enough, the state agrees with you. Essentially, they're going to have to partition things so that essentially one portion of the building is dedicated to the already existing medical marijuana. They're going to have to do that anyway because we negotiated a host agreement with them that charges a 3.5% local tax. This was before the state came along and legalized the sale of retail marijuana and imposed a limit of 3% on us. So actually, I thought we did pretty good beating the state, what the state eventually did with the other thing by 0.5%. They're going to have to keep entirely separate books. They're going to have to be entirely separate product lines. They're going to have to be kept apart from one another. So there essentially would be 2 operations within the same facility, the same building, if you will. So they will be segregated. They'll even have to have different people waiting on different clientele that comes in. If you come in with a medical marijuana card, you're going to go through door A, and you're going to go to the medical counter, and you're going to get whatever's being sold there. If you're just somebody off the street who's over the age of 21, you're going to go in door B, and you're going to buy retail products on the other side. So it is segregated. It's a requirement from the Cannabis Control Commission that the operations be segregated.
So then this goes back to the zoning bylaws that are all in question, where these medical distribution and retail stores can be.
Correct.
Yes. Excuse me?
So then there's my question.
Right.
Where is the retail store is going to be, because I don't believe the hospital district is part of
It is. That the hospital district is the institutional district. You're actually in the institutional district right now, believe it or not. It includes the schools, a good chunk of High Street, going down towards Bessie Park.
So I don't believe that we should be exposing young children to this. So I agree with his amendment saying that there should be a radius around our children.
There is under the general laws. You can only be within, you have to be 500 feet away from a school, or it's categorized as a place where children would congregate. That would be a place like the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, something like that. It wouldn't necessarily just be on a street corner where they're shooting hoop at a house.
Well, so then how far away from this medical distribution center is it from the high school or any?
It's well over 500 feet. We've mapped it out.
Okay.
Thank you. Gentleman on my left.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Bill Heaney, Precinct 1. My question has to do with if the institutional zone is included, or if this amendment passes, rather, does that prevent a second retail facility from coming into the institutional zone?
Can you answer the question?
Well, if you exclude the institutional zone from the zones where it's allowed, then it would preclude any retail sale in the institutional zone, whether it was from the existing medical folks or anybody else.
So if that's the case, and we're already committed to having the medical marijuana facility in the location that it's in, does it make sense then to exclude retail sales from the institutional zone, which would either force the medical facility to go into another zone for its retail license, or grandfather them into that location for its retail license, but in any event, prevent a second facility from coming into the institutional zone?
Well, that's the question you have to decide, I guess. I mean, my understanding is that some of the interest that's being shown, there's nothing in the institutional zone that would suffice for some of these operations that we've had approach us at this point in time. They need more space. I know that the medical marijuana people, it took them quite some time before they were able to acquire a building in there that was could fit their economies of scale and yet was big enough for them to conduct their operations. So I don't think that in terms of a choice for a second retail outfit, I mean, I'm not in the business, but it wouldn't be my first choice, unless I already had something there, as these folks do.
Yeah, but things can change. I mean, if there's no building today, doesn't mean that there'll be no building tomorrow.
Okay.
Big enough to fit.
Mr. Haney, I'm going to recognize Mr. Buckland as our town planner who deals with our zoning, and perhaps, I don't mean to put him on the spot, but if he's willing to, maybe he could clarify and answer some of the questions. Mr. Buckland?
Mr. Haney is right and correct in that the allowance for recreational marijuana sales within the institutional district would not preclude a second one from occurring. However, property and setback, the 500-foot setback requirement that the state regulations and now the town bylaw would preclude most properties from it being available for that second use, retail use. Do we have maps?
Matt?
It was in the presentation, yeah.
Matt, do you have the zoning map by any chance?
Yeah, keep going. So here we have the zoning map of the town, and we have a blow-up of different sections in here. If you go to the next slide, what we have here is showing where we identified children congregate on a regularly scheduled basis, or there's a school And those are the lighter red areas surrounded by the black line, which is 500-foot separation, the 500-foot buffer. If you hit the and see that blue line, that is where the separation to the right in the the red CS commercial strip district, you would have. In the to the right of the blue line in the red area, which is the commercial strip district, you would be available to build a retail operation. If you hit the next slide, in the upper right is the downtown district, the light green that used to be there is again, shows the number of uses that have a 500-foot setback buffer, which severely restricts the lighter green area, which is the institutional district. So we don't have that many properties available for that particular use. So the market would only bear what could be included within the properties that are available outside of the hospital and the school properties.
Madam Moderator, if I could just amplify on that. The bylaw you're considering tonight also prohibits these things from being within 1,500 feet of each other. So that's quite a distance. I think where that one is located, I don't think there's any room within that zoning district to get 1,500 feet away with it without getting into the setbacks from the schools and everything else. So pretty much by operation of the way the bylaw works, that's the only retail operation you're going to have there.
Okay, but this may be a belts and suspenders thing. Doesn't it make sense to prevent it from going into the institutional zone, even though you're saying that with other things around it, it's logical that it wouldn't happen? I mean,
it's not even a matter of logical. We know that these people have interest in the license. So as a matter of pure practicality, once they put in the application, nobody else can be within 1,500 feet of them. They've got to go to a different zone.
I like belts and suspenders.
Thank you. On my left.
Lisa Morales in Precinct 2. I'd like to speak in support of the amendment, and Selectman Teitelbaum pretty much made the argument that they have to have two completely separate operations anyway. Why not then let them put that entirely separate operation somewhere else, unless there's already been some kind of an agreement with Compassionate Care, or whatever their name is now, that they would get both licenses. So my question is, were there any kind of assurances that they would get both licenses and they would get them in the institutional zone?
To
Thank
answer
you.
the question only?
To answer the question, in these instances, all the town can do is negotiate host agreements with these people. The state issues the licenses. I'm certainly, nobody up here is in a position to bind the state on that. So that's the answer to that question.
Thank you. Is there anything further to be said on Mr. Muniz's amendment? Seeing no one standing. Mr. Slavin?
Just to clarify, because of the complexity of what's going on, there was a little piece added in, excuse me, for the Cannabis Control Commission. There was a little section there that talked about unreasonable difficulty in locating a retail operation. They've actually put in a little clause, which actually comes, I believe, Mr. Bowen, from the First Amendment, if I'm not mistaken, which is very disturbing because if it's a First Amendment clause in there, it's very easy to go to court on that. So if we restrict the retail sales too far as location, they have a perfectly good case for coming back and overturning our zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything further to be said on the amendment? Seeing no one standing, I will now call for vote on the amendment. Your vote will be on what is in your warrant, except that you're going to strike the institutional zone which is on section 392. This requires a majority vote. We're voting on Mr. Muniz's amendment. Requires a majority vote. All those in favor of Mr. Muniz's amendment, please say aye. All those opposed? No. The amendment fails. We now go back to the original amendment for, that is in your warrant in its entirety. Is there anything further to be said on Article 2? On my right.
Yes, so as I was saying, I would like to request a license and be afforded a slot.
Mr. Holmes, while I appreciate what you're asking, this is not the place where we would do that. What is before us is merely the rules and regulations, and for that you would have to go through the normal channels for applying for a license.
Okay, but now to my understanding, we're only allowing 3 licenses, or?
That's correct.
Well, so, I mean, I'd like to say that I plan on applying for it and that I'd like to be maybe make it 4 so that I might be able to get one.
Unfortunately, an amendment of that type would be out of scope. Within the scope of an article, you can always diminish it, but you cannot add to it. So trying to add one more would not be within the scope of the article.
Yeah, sorry, this is my first time meeting over here. So, so now, where can I go about getting an application for this?
I believe you have to go to the state.
Okay,
Okay.
great, thanks.
Thank you. Is there anything further to be said on Article 2? Seeing no one standing, I will call for a vote. Because this is a zoning change bylaw, it does require a 2/3 vote. I am going to try for a unanimous 2/3 uncounted vote, which means if it's unanimous, we don't have to take a count. So all those in favor of Article 2 as is in your warrant, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously by 2/3. I would now accept a motion to dissolve the meeting. I have a second. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out. I know with the impending storm, we appreciate that you came. Thank you.
Be safe.
All those in favor of dissolving the meeting, please say aye. All those opposed?
Take it easy.
So